Greetings everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are new to this channel, I'm Advocate William Matselo. The purpose of this channel is to teach South African law on topics that will assist mostly the vulnerable in our society, but it is also to preach the word of God. For the last 2 videos, we started on the topic of domestic violence. Part 1, we defined domestic violence. A video thereafter, which is our part 2, we defined domestic relationship. Now this is the third part of the same topic. And today we will look on how to obtain a protection order. Now you have qualified the 2 requirements. You are cocksure that indeed domestic violence was committed against you by a person with whom you have a domestic relationship based on the definitions of the 2 concepts or the 2 topics that we have provided. Once you are sure, the first step is to approach the domestic violence court. You go to the lowest court in the land, which is the magistrate court in South Africa. When you arrive there, you go to the magistrate court, to the domestic violence court. You meet with the clerks. In terms of the Domestic Violence Act, the clerks are enjoined or they have a responsibility to assist you. So when you get there, the first thing is for you to complete an affidavit whereby you outline the incident, exactly what happened. And even if you don't know how to write, the clerks of the court, because the act says they must assist you, they will assist you how to write that affidavit. They are duty bound. And to that affidavit, once it is completed, they will put a court stamp. And then thereafter, you will briefly, because now that's how you would have communicated your story. And by the time you leave for home, you should be able to leave with an interim order. The reason why it's an interim and it has a return date, the return date is that date which says you must come back maybe after 2 weeks, but they will specify the date. And the reason why it's not a final order yet, it's just an interim at that moment, is because the respondent or the person that you are complaining about, because you are the complainant, should be able or will be called by way of that interim order with a return date to the court to come and explain his story. Because in terms of the law, the magistrate or the judge can't just issue an order before he or she hears the other side of the story. So it is at that stage where you are given an interim order with a return date, which is a date that tells you when to come back. And this interim order should be served on the respondent. There are 2 different ways in which you can serve it, because obviously it is dangerous. You cannot go yourself. You leave with a copy for yourself, for him, and a copy for yourself and for the one that you're going to give to the police to serve on him. In other instances, people who have means, they use the sheriff of court. But in most instances, people who don't have the means, they will give it to the nearest police station to go and serve the said person. So during the time of the return date or the date that you are given to come back, there must be a return of service. A return of service is proof that this person was served. The court will be able to make a determination whether this person was indeed served. Reason being, if this person was served and he's not there, what is called a default judgment will be issued against him, meaning the court will issue an order in your favor, whether he is there or not, because he was given an opportunity or he was summoned by the court and he chose not to come. If he chooses to come, he will be given an opportunity to present his side of the story. It can be verbally, it can be by way of affidavit as well. So once he has presented his side of the story, because what actually happens is on the return date, both of you will have to appear in the magistrate's chambers. These are proceedings that are conducted in camera, as they say in law, behind closed doors. In law, they say these kind of proceedings, to borrow a Latin word, they are sui generis, meaning that they are very unique in the sense that it's a mixture of civil and criminal. And the way the matter is handled is very, very casual. So it's not something that you can feel like, if I don't have a lawyer or whatever. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a lawyer if you want a lawyer. I'll be the last one to say not to have a lawyer. But I'm just saying the system is very friendly again towards you. So you come, there's a return of service, prove that this person was served. You go to the magistrate's chambers, and then this person make his own, or he present his own side of the story. Once the magistrate has now listened to both of you in chambers, he decides whether to issue a protection order or not. But in most instances, obviously, he will issue it, because it's very, very rare that people would make up stories and say they are being violated or that there was domestic violence against them when it didn't happen. Though I must say that there is an exception to every general rule. There are instances, of course, where people have said there was domestic violence committed against them when it didn't happen. But then it would be for the court to decide after listening to both of you. And this is not to discourage you at all, because these days the courts, the judicial officers, they practice what is called judicial activism. They are very aware. Even the government these days makes an effort to train people to be aware, to be conscious, not to make people to go through what is called secondary victimization, whereby you have been violated and then you go to the courts, which become now very unfriendly to you and not sympathizing with your situation. So there's a lot of social context going on these days where people are conscientized on how to deal with these issues. And once the magistrate is convinced that indeed there was domestic violence, that indeed you had a domestic relationship with the respondent, he will go ahead and issue an order. This order is also issued with a warrant of arrest. So much so, as soon as the person violates the order or he does not comply with the order, he's immediately arrested. Some of the conditions that can be attached to this protection order is, for example, if maybe he's assaulting you, he'll be told to stop. If allowing him to go back would be dangerous, he can be told to leave the house. If he is the sole provider, even if he's to leave the house, the court can still order him to continue to pay maintenance, to continue to pay the bond. Because in most instances, it has been established that women, in most instances, are victims of domestic violence. And in most instances, they are dependent on respondents. That is why sometimes women would be reluctant to come forth to complain, to say, but if I tell him to leave, or if I leave, he will not maintain. So that is why the court will issue that kind of order. But obviously, each case will be treated according to its own circumstances. So now you leave a court now with what is called now the final order, because in the beginning you were given a one which is an interim, which is just temporary. So on the return day, you are now given a final order with a warrant of arrest. And this should be implemented when there is a violation of that order, because in the main, the court will say, stop whatever you are doing, depending on what it was that he was doing, depending on what it was that you were complaining about. In other cases, you may find that what I define as domestic violence, everything the woman is going through, emotional, psychological, economic, physical. There are instances where he's going through all of them, but whatever your issue was, that brought you to the domestic violence court, the court will order that it should not happen. There is a lot that I can say about domestic violence. The psychological factors. That is why in most instances, when we used to do training on domestic violence, we used to make people who work in that field aware that when you deal with a victim of domestic violence, you must know that there are other factors at play. But for now, I will stop here. There's a lot that I can say. But for now, for example, I can continue to talk about why do women stay? Their religious factors, their cultural factors, and so on and so forth. But for now, I will stop here. I hope this 3-part series was very useful. And I wish you all the best in whatever step that you have to take regarding this issue. Please share this information. As I said, there are so many people who need this information. As I said, it is a societal ill. It's something that does not choose whether you are black, whether you are white, whether you are educated or whether you are not educated, whether you are poor or whether you are rich. As I usually say, like with HIV and AIDS, if you are not affected or if you are not infected, you are affected. You may not be living with that situation, but there's somebody very close to you. There's always somebody very close to you who has that challenge. So our responsibility as leaders in society, as relatives, as neighbors, is to be our brother's keepers. So the least that I can do for victims of domestic violence is to share, is to teach on the subject as somebody who regards herself as an expert in the area. But your responsibility can be sharing this video. And at the same time, finally, please don't forget to subscribe. God bless you.